So I will call this meeting to order, 6:05. This is the Imagine Girdwood December 2024 regular meeting. And before we jump into the welcomes, the introductions, and just this might be close, if not hopefully our last meeting before the plan is adopted. And it's been a long journey, and I think many of us have learned a lot, grown older together. And it's kind of a little bit of a milestone. So yeah, I mean, I think we should just congratulate each other on the work that's been done up to this point. And I think it's been a very successful project. Whatever happens next month, by far the majority of what the community wants is going to be included in the plan, and we've had a huge step forward from the 95 plan that we still have today. That said, let's do a quick introduction around the room. Holly, would you like to start and then introduce people?
Yep. Holly Spoth Torres. I have been your contractor this whole time with Huddle AK. Go ahead, Amanda.
Amanda Sassy. I'm the treasurer of Imagine Girdwood.
Okay, we'll go to Barbara next.
I'm Barbara Cruz, and I'm the chair of the Trails Committee and interested in this whole process.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mike Edgington, chair of Imagine Girdwood.
Brianna.
Brianna Sullivan, community member and on GBOS.
Brian.
Brian Burnett, Girdwood resident, GBOS.
Go to Carolyn.
Carolyn Brodeen, Girdwood resident, very interested in this project and the plan, as I was in the 95 plan. Thanks.
Okay, we'll go to Chase next.
Good evening, Chase Berenson, Girdwood resident and vice chair of Imagine Girdwood.
Daniel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel McKenna-Foster. I'm from the Long Range Planning Division. I've sort of been the embedded bureaucrat in this project.
Kirk.
Kirk Hessel, longtime Girdwood resident.
Crystal.
Crystal Hoke, resident and active community member on a couple boards. Thank you.
We'll go to Mike.
Oh, Mike Davidson, I think you're caught on, just interested Girdwood resident.
Hi, Mike. Okay, and there were two. Soren next.
Yeah, hi, Soren Worth, Girdwood resident and sometime newspaper reporter.
Welcome. And then Mitch.
Hi, Mitch Ross. I'm a member at large of the Imagine Girdwood board.
Thanks, Mitch. And then let's see if I'm letting Paul in the door. Let's see if he's going to connect. Anyway, he's not connected to audio, I don't think. Not yet, but go ahead, Mike.
Okay, see the agenda tonight. We'll do basically quick information reports, update on where we've got to in the various presentations the last month or so, and then what we're going to do to prepare for the public hearing on December the 17th. A little bit about fundraising, and that probably will be it. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Chase. And we'll do this by assent, so unless anyone objects. I'm not hearing any objections, so agenda is approved. I haven't got the link to the 25th. That's on the should be on the shared documents folder.
This one?
Holly. But the first one we can open. We didn't. There was only one person, I think, at the last meeting who had been at. Well, only two of us, me and one other person who'd been at the July 31st. So if anyone's had a chance to look over this, we'll just do the approval. Particularly people who are at that meeting, who are listed at the top.
I'll move to approve the July 31st minutes.
Thank you, Chase. Nice. Barbara was there. I'm sorry. I think
sorry.
Brianna was there. Barbara was not there, I don't think.
Kirk was there, Crystal.
And Kirk. Yep, Crystal. So if anyone would like
I think
to,
that's it.
Second, this Kirk, if you need it.
thank you. Again, if there's no objection, we'll do this by assent. Not hearing any objection, so we'll pass that. The meeting, the notes from the last meeting, minutes from the last meeting are online. I didn't add a link. The looks of it, I'll fix that. If you just go to the shared documents page.
No, where is it?
At the top, that one, that link in the grey section.
This one?
Current and the current and past, just down a bit on the
Why?
page, just above the words regular meeting.
Wait,
Down
no,
here.
no.
Actually, you can, but I think if you go up there, and you're right in the middle of the page, that one, yes.
It's hidden in plain sight.
There's like 50 different ways of doing this.
I'm the worst.
Uh,
This one.
Minutes.
yes, that's the minutes. It should be there. There we go.
Whew. No, that's
Oh,
2019.
that's 2019. That was a while back.
I was like, Eric Fullerton? What?
Yeah, so
Those are probably my minutes. They're not as good.
That tells you something about how long we've been working on this.
Oh, we have been going for a while.
There's no minutes here.
Are they not there?
No, they're
Let
not
me
here.
just check. I thought I saw. No, I put them over. Sorry about that. That's the problem with doing too many different things at the same time. Actually, no, I don't see them now. Oh, you overwrote something else. We'll come back to that, maybe. Okay. So where are we? Minutes approval. Any other public comments? We haven't had any other public comments by email. So let's move over to information reports. I'll start from my perspective. Officer reports is basically what we're going to talk about later. It's just going through the assembly process, finding out dealing with the information we've got back and the questions we've got back from assembly members and from planning and from other staff. Again, I think we'll just really that's the focus of the rest of the meeting, so I won't say anymore. Amanda, do you have anything to add from the treasurer perspective?
Sorry, I didn't send it to you, but it's the same as last time. So the rest, I'm putting in the chat, the rest of the ARPA grant that's left over is $1,823.40. And I'm expecting Huddle we need them to send a final invoice for the ARPA grant at least by December 31st to be able to close out.
What is that total again?
$1823.40, and I put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
And then for I'm just calling it donations, because that's been separated in the Girdwood Inc. accounting system. So the donations right now, I think there's one that's pending, but it's the same. It's at $1,295.19. Also in the chat.
Thank you. That's excellent. Actually, I did mention I did try and get some thank you cards from Vistaprint, and then I'm not sure. I'm going to blame them for screwing up the order, but it's probably me. So they didn't arrive. So I've got some others coming, which hopefully will be here soon. And I think the other people on the board should we can write those, sign those, and send them out to the people who've donated, both the latest round and earlier on this year as well. Because that's a huge thank you. I think we had a target of 3,000, so we're almost halfway there. And I don't think we've done a lot of outreach. We probably should very soon. Okay. Chase or Mitch, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Hey, Mike, I have no report for this evening. Thank you.
Same for me. No report.
Okay, thank you. Right, so if there are no questions on officer reports, we'll jump to updates on the approval process. So in the packet, I sent links for both the documents and the videos that were taken at the two previous presentations. Well, last month, I'd say earlier this month, it's last month. There was a presentation, we were asked to do a fairly short presentation, about maybe 5 minutes or so, at the Community and Economic Development Committee. There were many presentations. It was actually a great meeting. It's worth listening to everything that happened there. We gave a kind of short trailer, I suppose, for the comprehensive plan, and I tried to pick a couple of highlights. I think we only really got one major question back at that meeting, but it provoked a couple of discussions afterwards from other assembly members, sort of offline. Like you said, that was really a sort of here are the highlights and main issues. And then we had the assembly work session on the 21st, which is a full hour. And I know Holly presented there, planning presented there, and I presented a little bit there as well. And that generated quite a lot of questions. Actually, Holly, do you want to give a summary from your perspective, and then I'll throw in anything you
So,
want to add afterwards.
I'm gonna do this for now. So I always find, I'm just gonna give you a little bit of context first. I guess my first question is, was anybody listening in, or did anybody watch it?
I believe I was listening in, and
Okay.
or I definitely watched the recording. One or the
Okay.
other.
All
And I
right,
watched it live.
okay,
It's Kirk. I watched it too.
okay, good. I'm happy to know that there were members lurking out there. I always struggle with those presentations because one of two things always happens every single time. This happened at the Planning and Zoning Commission. You only have an hour. You never have enough time. If you don't give enough context, so if you like just dive into the issues that you know you need to talk about without giving any context, you get this negative feedback like, well, we don't really know what you're talking about. You didn't give us enough context, blah, blah, blah. So then if you spend some time giving context, then people get frustrated that you're giving context and they're like, you should just dive right into the meat of the plan. So at the Planning and Zoning Commission, we didn't give a lot of context. Or we did give background, we got the feedback. Anyway, whatever. I always feel frustrated because there's never enough time. We've spent 5 years developing this plan, and it's actually quite difficult to bring the assembly up to speed in that amount of time. I mean, you assume that they have done all their homework and read the plan. And I think many of them did, but it's always evident that people need more context than that hour. So that's like my first takeaway. Would you agree with that, Mike? Like, it's just hard
Yes.
to do,
And
right?
it's extra hard when you've been kind of, immersed in all the details. It's very hard to go back and provide a presentation for people who haven't.
Right.
I think that's the problem we had in planning and zoning to some extent.
Right. So I think what I want to stress is that it is important for you all to continue to participate moving forward, because a lot of the things that we're going to talk about from this point forward are like, they'll say, well, why didn't you make that parcel mixed density? That parcel should be mixed density. And my response is going to be, we actually did make that parcel mixed density, but because of all the community input, we changed it. And now you're looking at the plan that is a result of all the community input that has happened. So I think that at this point, there's always the chance that because the assembly hasn't been part of that whole entire process, right? And if you dig into the document and into that comment table in the back and all the background, you'll see the entire process that we went through to get to that final land use plan map that's in the document. But the assembly needs to remember. So I would continue to participate, and when there is a public hearing, to participate so that as they have these deliberations, they know that the document that is in front of them is the one that has been reviewed by you all. Okay. The other thing, and I just used the word mixed density. That's the other thing that I think we have to do some work on. You know, in my opinion, the comprehensive plan is the document that will set you up to, you know, make changes to your zoning code and make changes to policies moving forward using the guidance of the comprehensive plan. But I think the input we got was there are a couple of things that need a little bit more definition in the plan, like the definition of density, the difference between mixed density and, what do we call it? Do we call it low density?
I think currently in the current version, it says it's low density residential and mixed density
Mixed
residential.
density residential. And so they want a little bit more discussion on what that means. And I think we're prepared to do that. What else, Mike? I don't know. There are 10, and these are not my words. These are the assembly members' words. There are 10 members of the assembly that don't represent Girdwood. And so again, it's an indication that you have to continue to participate, because there's going to be 10 members of the Anchorage Assembly discussing your document who don't represent you. So, and again, their words, not mine.
Yeah. One assembly member said that, and I'm definitely going to use it against them from this point onwards. Although it's only until April. Yeah, so I think I think the thing I'd add is there was I think the thing we didn't wouldn't say we didn't expect. There were a couple of ways that the assembly ordinance could have been presented. It could have been presented based on the recommendations from planning and zoning, or it could have been presented based on the application we made. Planning department prepared it, and they chose unsurprisingly, I suppose, chose to use the planning and zoning recommendations as starting point. So what's in front of the assembly at the moment is basically starting with what planning and zoning recommended, not what we submitted. So, you know, that's where we are. That's where we are now. I don't want to go too much into the what we're doing next. But so what we were really discussing, I think in my notes, I noticed I definitely made a comment about the whole issue about density caused a lot of confusion. I think we're using the word density in the document and shouldn't be using the word density. A lot of the assembly members see density as the primary measure of how good zoning is. And, you know, we know it's a bit broader than that. And we're proposing something which kind of doesn't measure or doesn't really talk about density at all. Density is kind of a side effect or a consequence of decisions we'd be making in zoning. So I think that's something we definitely have to explain better. And that was clear. Otherwise, the discussion was really about both the changes that planning and zoning recommended and the one change that planning asked for that planning and zoning did not recommend.
I guess further discussion then is there was also a lot of discussion about where the land use plan map recommends mixed density versus lower density residential. Again, I'm just using the terms that are in the plan now. And the assembly kept pressing me to understand why we didn't include higher density residential in areas closer to the middle of town. So, and I just explained the process that we went through and that this was your opportunity to set your vision for how you wanted your community to grow and change. And I said it's hard to predict development costs also. There was a lot of discussion about availability of utilities, the cost of doing development. Anyway. That was another hot topic.
Yeah, and we know that development is expensive, which is one of the reasons the plan actually emphasizes better use of existing housing, not just building new housing. I think that's the other message that, you know, in everything I talk about, everywhere I talk about, and I know Daniel is probably bored with me saying this, but the, you know, there's a lot of focus in Anchorage Bowl on additional housing and new housing because that's what's needed. There aren't enough housing units. Here we have plenty of housing units. They're just mostly empty. So if we could wave a magic wand and take a third of the currently empty housing and occupy it with people who work and live in this community, then we would have solved our housing problem. And when we build more housing, it nearly all goes to, again, Chase can talk to this more than anyone else, really. Almost all housing is empty. New housing becomes empty. And unless we address that, you know, we could build 100 and more housing units and maybe get 3 occupied or 5 occupied. It would be that sort of order, you know, maybe 10 or 12. But that is just not the case in Anchorage Bowl. And the simplistic message, the right message in Anchorage Bowl of the solution to housing problem is more housing. That's enough. Here it is not enough. And it's just a frustrating exercise of being told constantly, you know, you just need more housing. Well, we don't need more occupied housing. And that's a tricky thing to discuss when it just isn't relevant to, as we said earlier, 10 of the 12 members, completely not relevant to their community. And the other 2 members, it isn't relevant to most of the places they represent. You know, 90-odd% of the place they represent. So that's kind of a general frustration. You know, we have to just keep banging on that message. Maybe more effective voices than me need to do it as well.
So
Okay.
I guess there's any, I guess I wonder if there's any questions or discussion or from anyone who was there or anyone. Go ahead, Brian.
Hi, Holly. Hey, thanks a lot for all the work you've been doing. You mentioned something that the assembly was, they were wondering why we weren't making more use of land into what they're calling the middle of town. Where is the middle of Girdwood?
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe that was my word. I'm not sure. I actually don't remember.
Sorry to interrupt, but I've heard them use that term before too, and they've kind of identified the center of Girdwood up by the resort.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That seems to be. Yeah, I've a couple of times I've heard something very similar being described of the, you know, the center of town is probably Alyeska Basin and everything else is distant from the center of town, whereas we know that the physical distances aren't that long. And, you know, if anything is the center of town, it's town square.
Exactly. So
you know, resort is a very different beast. So, you know, the fact we have high density, we have, you know, high density. We have our what we currently call mixed density residential, pretty close to town center or town square. We have it just north of town square. We have it just west of town square. East, unfortunately, there's an airport, and south of town center. That's it's very hard to hear that and think that people are paying attention and reading the map, looking at the maps, and have much understanding of the community.
I think the other area though too is the Virgin Creek area. Because I think that the presumption is that there's utilities nearby already, but I don't always think people think through the traffic implications of that either.
Yeah, there is water and sewer near there.
Right.
There isn't extendable road at the moment.
Right.
We're just going to put a bond on in April to spend 3 million to rebuild basically the first 1,500 feet.
Right. And
And it's-
also what we heard through the public process was there was and this is a values discussion, right? There was a higher value placed on that land being used for parks and trails, which it already is.
I'd like to, Daniel, I hope you don't mind if I ask you this, but I know you probably are going to be better at representing this viewpoint than several of us here are. What do you think is how would you summarize that kind of comment? I wouldn't say criticism, but that observation and comment on the plan.
In terms of the center,
in terms of the center, or in terms of I think the criticism we've heard of, the quote higher density development is on the periphery, not in the center. That's the kind of general comment I've heard, which I personally disagree with, as you know, but
I think it fundamentally comes down to, in a world of limited infrastructure funding, high infrastructure maintenance costs, it makes sense to put the most stuff on existing infrastructure where there are the most connections to other things. So, whether it's, next to the store, or whether that's up by the resort or whatever, I think just in general, I could see that the argument would be, if you put more stuff where people can reach more stuff, you're going to have better outcomes in terms of infrastructure efficiency and that sort of thing. Whereas if you put more stuff or more people in areas which require new infrastructure, now not only do you have new sort of travel activity and other stuff in a different part, you also have a whole nother set of infrastructure you have to pay for. And up here in the bowl, at least, of course, the conversation is how there's so much that's overbuilt. The backlog of infrastructure is so high. And when you build stuff new, it's great. It's great for 10, 20 years. But then you come to the end of it and you're like, oh, shoot. And so if you focus most stuff on existing stuff, then it's that much easier, because every time you go in and fix a road, you're fixing the road for 50 households instead of 20 households. And so it's that. So I think
right,
that's,
yeah.
I don't know if that's where it answers your question or not. But.
So it's kind of the argument about sprawl, really.
Yeah, because Christopher Constant said to me, but he didn't really use a complete sentence. I don't think he was like, so then the government has to subsidize utility infrastructure. That's what he said about more sprawling type development. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that maybe we need just a larger scale, actually, literally a scale on that map, because I think there's literally we're talking about something a quarter of a mile from a major road or less. Actually, generally significantly less, dozens of 100, maybe 100 yards maximum. This isn't a very big valley. Everything we're dealing with is adjacent to something else that's developed, except for Halton Hills. Halton Hills was pushed a long way up.
But I think we can also do a better job of describing the context, that the intent, based on your vision, goals, and policies too, is to also better utilize existing developed areas, so that
yes,
the density, like you'll be allowed to. So it's about the impact to the parcels, right? We want to lower impact to the parcels, but you could actually potentially have 2 or 3 units on one parcel instead of just a vacant single family home. I'm not sure they were, I guess they followed that. I'm not sure. I didn't feel like that point was coming across. Implementing that is going to be the key, but go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, this is a really interesting discussion that I've kind of wondered about, the support for infrastructure with all of the different developments that have been proposed, because it seems like the planning documents don't really do a very good job of, well, if you think back to Holton Hills and the scale that that was on, I never really could see that what the impact was going to be for water and sewer and electricity, and obviously there's going to have to be major infrastructure support, as well as even bridges and roads for other access points. And so this whole discussion seems like kind of what Daniel was observing, of trying to attach more to the existing infrastructure. It's kind of like an old cabin that's only got one electrical outlet, and so you just start plugging in extension cords and run them all over the place in the cabin, and eventually the cabin burns down because it's overloaded, rather than rewiring the cabin to put in the infrastructure that's really needed. And I don't know how to address the situation, but I agree that we should be developing more infrastructure, and I don't see that as a negative, other than somebody has to pay for it. But rather than continuing to concentrate in the areas that already have infrastructure that happens to be there until it's overloaded, and then we can't do that anymore, and then that's not a planned approach to anything. So that's just my observation. I don't have any solutions.
Go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to share that I was kind of disappointed. I watched the video. I didn't see it in real time, but I was disappointed that the structure of the meeting in the end allowed what I figured was probably less than 4 minutes. Maybe it was 4 minutes for Holly and Mike to respond to the planning, zoning's, proposals, and a lot of that time was spent answering, questions of the assembly that were of confusing nature anyway. Led me to believe they didn't understand the plan that was proposed. So I think what's left is to really stress the plan. I don't think they got a solid hearing of what the plan was and why this community circled around behind this plan. There was the impression that it wasn't a community plan. I think it was kind of intimated that, and you had to kind of admit this in a way that was unfortunate, but that was a plan put together by those who had a loud voice at meetings. And I don't think that represented what happened over 5 years. So I think if all that's left is this last meeting, I think there's a lot of work to be done to get down to what are the basics, what do we really want? And I think if there's a way to resolve this low density versus mixed density, so that doesn't take all the time, I think that's sort of the key to this, because we should be spending time, in my opinion, working on that Mitten area and the Virgin Creek area. Those are the sacred areas, I think. And this is our last chance to speak up for those, because this is pretty important. There's a lot of other development opportunities that have been presented that are available and without sacrificing these two areas. So that's my thoughts on the meeting there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Kirk, about Chris constant push back on me when I kept saying, I would say the community. And he would say, you mean the people who were at the meetings? I was like, I don't know. I just don't argue at that point.
We have different opinions. We have different approaches, Holly.
Yeah.
I love arguing with Chris. Yeah, I think the stress there is, we had 900 different people involved in this process, from the survey all the way through the multiple public comment periods. From a population of 2,900 are involved. Again, you scale that to Anchorage, and it's, what is it, 140,000 people are being involved in the plan project. And I don't think even the most highly attended we don't have that many people voting in anything here. I think even November votes, we had 60,000 people vote or something. So it's it's twice the there's twice the involvement in this project as typically involved in anything that happens. Even the least engaged part of it. So there's been a lot more engagement. I think that's a point which Chris makes with a bit more accuracy in other criticisms of community councils. I don't think it's a valid criticism of this plan.
No, and where, maybe the attendance for these meetings might drop, but when there were big decisions to be made on this plan, there were a lot of people participating, I thought.
Hundreds.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, I just
sorry. Go ahead.
You two, I thought you guys did a really good job, and the summary comments were spot on. And sometimes the last things people say they listen to, but I just think that, well, we'll see when we talk about strategy going forward. But I think the important things is to focus on the 2 or 3 things that are most important and really try to get those. Because if we try to get everything or focus on everything, some of these important ones are going to slip through. There seems to be a lot of support, it seems, that I felt from this meeting about the resort's plans. And honestly, this whole bit about just because there's utilities to a commercial enterprise, I can't imagine why that means that there needs to be more commercial enterprises. That's just the logic doesn't follow. At some point, you have to decide where you should have people live and where you should have density. And I think that's what the community did. Now, how we communicate that, maybe we can do a better job. But I certainly don't think that there's any reason we should stand behind developing just because there happens to be a bunch of utilities over where the resort ended up. So I think, yeah, the strategy going forward is going to be pretty darn important. So thanks.
Okay, so it's a good segue into moving into our next item, which is we've looked back. I think we've covered what's happened in previous meetings. Now let's focus on what happens in the next meeting. So December the 17th is when there's a public hearing. Holly was on vacation last week, so we only had the opportunity to really sort of catch up and talk today about our path forward. I think one of the idea, what we're probably going to do is, assuming Holly's still in agreement or able to do this, in terms of staffing. Oh, I got the thumbs up. I think what we're going to do is most of the things that planning and zoning recommended were good changes, and the community agrees it's in alignment with community vision. I think they were, 7 or 8 out of 12, 11 were absolutely positive. So, and then we also discovered some problems and we want to make some technical amendments. So I think what we're going to do is create a revision of the document, which incorporates all of the sort of consensus or agreed changes, and then also use that as an opportunity to both expand on and refine this issue around density. And that can then be introduced as an S version. That's my understanding from several assembly members who are prepared to do this. So at that point, we've basically incorporated everything, all the feedback that sort of come in from these series of meetings for planning and zoning and the assembly, and we'll have both a document and some other collateral around that, which kind of represents, I think, the consensus of where we are, and then we can just focus on the few items that are left where there are differences. And I think even one of the ones that we came away from planning and zoning thinking there was a difference, I don't think there actually is. I think the South Town site thing is basically resolved. It's just about the exact line you draw, whether it's the 500, the 100-year floodplain, but the principles are agreed. And that really leaves 4 items, I think it was, which is, the Mitten, the Virgin Creek area, the Up Valley area, and the additional change which planning wanted planning and zoning to approve, and planning and zoning commission did not approve, which is the change to mixed density around Alyeska Highway and Arlberg, the sort of Alyeska Basin grid section. So I think they're kind of, if we do that, then we'll at least we won't have to go back and discuss all these other things that basically aren't in contention or aren't an issue, and then we can just focus on the thing. Hopefully, it'll resolve the issue around density and the confusion around density, and then we can just focus on these last four topics. 4.5, because there's also some question about vegetative buffers and size. So I think that's the strategy we want to follow in terms of the assembly action. But then, so really the key messages are around those things. I think the key messages are what does the, what's the engagement, how much the community has been involved in this, what all the positive messages are. And then if people want to focus on the differences between planning and zoning recommendations and what the community wants, then we can have, those can be a topic of discussion as well. Am I missing anything, Holly?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
I guess you can just,
sorry.
maybe you can, do you want to talk about the parkland map, or is that just kind of resolved?
I think the parkland map is resolved. There was a question that came up in the assembly work session about whether including a future parkland map makes any commitments, and I think that's been kind of quietly shelved as a question. That's my understanding. We had an approach that we think works, and I think we'll stay with that, of just having it as a kind of note of this is the feedback from the community engagement. So it pushes us one step further towards having. I mean, we're actually, as a community, we're about to kick off we're about to generate an RFP for a park plan, and this document effectively already has done part of that initial analysis. So I think that one we can kind of consider resolved.
Yeah, I agree.
Crystal, did you have a question?
I do. I'm wondering where the map is for the designated park land.
There isn't one yet.
So that's, I mean, I would hope that maybe that's like a little bit of a concern to others. Like, that was one of the things that Meg Zelatel had said, like, oh, why aren't you guys identifying your parkland here? And then Holly's response, if I can, it was like, we tried to, and the planning department wanted it out. And so it's like, okay, we can't put it in. We can't, I feel like it needs to be identified somewhere. And then like, I definitely want to see the map before I say I support this and this is correct in my opinion.
You have seen the map because it was already on the land use plan map as future dedicated parkland. It had its own hatch on it.
So what we're actually doing is taking one of the layers in the land use map we included in our final comp plan land use map. We're taking one of those layers out and putting it in a separate map. The argument being that it doesn't represent the current state. It represents there's kind of a set of things that would have to be done before that would be realized as dedicated parkland. So we're pulling it out and putting it in a separate map. And then that's also going to be part of the discussion about the parks plan. So there's also going to be another process, another plan. I'll go into more detail there. But we wanted to make sure we captured that information and we have that information, and it will be in the comp plan. It'll just won't be part of the core land use map. It'll be a parallel map.
So
but these are all, at the end of the day, these are all electronic maps. So they can all be put into the same map if you want to.
So will that map be available for like when the S1 is published? So, I mean, it sounds like it's a relatively easy map to create. So like, let's generate it. Right?
It's exactly it's a layer. It's exactly what is in the land use map now. It's just it will only show, instead of showing, 20 different things on the legend, it will effectively show one. So it's exactly the same map. It's just pulling one layer out and putting it on a separate page.
Okay, I just want to stress, like, it's important for me to see it because there are some things on the land use map that are marked mixed use that I would like to see park. So like, that's why I want to see the map so bad.
But you already know the answer to that too, which is parks. Because you're talking about a RV park.
Yeah, I'm talking about South Townsite specifically.
Right. Well, you're talking about an RV park, and park use is an allowed use in a mixed use zone. And so the other feedback, and so here's just going around the horn again, the other feedback from HLB is you already have the South Townside Master Plan, which identifies those areas as mixed use. So that's gonna remain mixed use, but what you wanna do is allowed in that zone.
Yes, but we're also talking about that parcel transferring over to Girdwood Parks and Rec. So that would mean that we would want to identify it as a future designated park parcel.
I can probably tell you though, at this point, we're not gonna make that change. That would need to be something different, but I don't know.
At the same time as we're doing this, HLB is also putting out their work plan for 2025. And my understanding is that potential use is going to be, probably will be in there. And if it's not, we'll definitely request it's in there.
Yeah,
So there are a couple of different ways of achieving the same thing here.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying, Crystal, is that it's like, it's not the end of the road for that one. Like, based on what happens with that, because that parcel isn't subdivided at all yet, right? Not at all. Like, if it's identified in the land use plan as mixed use, it's not the end of the road, it can still be a dedicated park.
But that would also mean that it could also be like commercial space if it's mixed use. So there would be no commitment at all for it to be park. That's
right.
And like on all of our draft maps, we were showing it as designated park, and then it got, basically stripped, and you can't put it in there. So how do we identify that we're interested in that area being park? It's like, it's just confusing because now we're gonna pass it that says mixed, but really you could do commercial there.
Yeah, which I think is an RV park, is commercial, right?
Well, not if it's operated by Girdwood Parks and Rec, so it would depend. But, that would also mean you could put residential on it as well. So you could do residential, commercial. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be possibilities, but like, if we've already determined we're interested in the park, like, I'm not seeing the spot in the plan where we say that that's what we want.
I think yeah, that's gonna be, it's gonna, in the S version, it'll be mixed use, which is what is in the South Townside Master Plan. So your next opportunity is the park plan process.
Gone very quiet. So I'm just trying to think of the best way of approaching this. So yeah, I think in terms of the way it's presented, we're going to try it, at least I'm going to try it and focus on the on what the plan does, why the plan overall is important. The major changes in policy, the major changes in direction, the modernization, the reflection of what the community wants now, or not what a tiny percentage of the community wanted, including Carolyn. But I think when I look back at the data, the survey that was done for the 95 plan, which was actually done in, I think, 93, had 90 people responded for a population of about 1,500. We had nearly 800 people respond for a population of 2,000. So we're a third bigger. And we had nearly 10 times as many, 8 times as many people respond to the survey. So we definitely have had a much wider involvement than the previous plan. So, emphasizing that community involvement, the positive message, the focus on housing, the focus on increasing housing, both availability of housing as well as additional housing. Focus on transportation, especially the focus on recreation, and the fact that, again, Girdwood has this balance. The natural environment is our economy. It's not, you know, we're not here in order to sell things in strip malls. The thing which is, there's a great use for that. There's places that do that very well. That's not what Girdwood is for. Girdwood is here for, Girdwood exists and its economy exists because of the environments. There is always going to be a point where you know, additional development starts cannibalizing the whole essence and the purpose of, and really the economic value for the community. So it starts, you know, you're starting to eat up your own muscles, if you like. So this is the kind of general messaging I'll be putting forward, both a values argument and just a basic economic argument. And then I think there are other people who are going to be focused more on the specific differences between what planning recommended and what we've recommended as a community. And I think while I'm comfortable to defend what we recommend as a community and it's well thought out, is consistent, I think there's definitely need for voices to go into more detail and point out the specific issues there. I think one example is how, you know, how important trails are, how the trails plans from the past and the future require, you know, some kind of limits to the kind of development in some areas. And then also kind of, you know, the general balance that the plan has. Anything anyone would like to speak to or talk about? Now is our opportunity.
Hey, Mike, this is Kirk.
Yep.
On the structure of the comments, how does that work? How do you get time allocated, and how much do you have, and how's that the mechanics?
Right. Yeah. So there's written comments now, so you can submit written comments through we could even go through a quick demo of that. As soon as, no, actually now there's a website that enables you to comment on specific things coming in front of the assembly. So you can use that website. You can use emails to either individual assembly members or all assembly members to do written comments. On the night when there's the public hearing occurs, which is the 17th, Tuesday the 17th, you can either turn up in person at the meeting and then you will have 3 minutes to speak, or you can register the day before if you contact, there's again an email address on the website, and I'll make sure everyone's aware of that. You can send an email the day before 5 o'clock, and you'll be added to a phone queue. So when the item comes up for discussion, the assembly will call you and you will have 3 minutes to speak to it. There's nothing to stop you from doing both written and live spoken testimony. And in fact, that's probably the most effective. I think the most effective way is writing your comments, sending them in, and then if you can, either saying them in person in the assembly or over the phone. That's probably the most effective. Honestly, a lot of comments that are happening now are probably going to have an outsized impact as well, because, you know, there's probably a fewer now. By the time the items in front of the assembly, I think a lot of assembly members have made their mind up. So you probably can't change your mind, but you can, you know, tweak some ideas and tweak some comments and maybe change 1 or 2 votes when it comes to the actual hearing on the day. So written comments beforehand probably have the most impact. But then some very, you know, some eloquent testimony also has an impact on some members.
Okay. Do you want me to show people how to do this?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't think it's easy to find.
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll show you what I do. This is what I do. I Google Anchorage Assembly. I don't know. And I feel like I do it differently every time, but then I click on it. And then I go to.
I'm not seeing your screen, Holly. If you're.
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, I had it paused. Are you back with me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I go to Anchorage Assembly. I click on that. Then you get to their homepage. You're like, great, there's a picture. I don't want to see the picture, but Okay, I click on search legislation. That's what I just did. Could also browse, but I just found it pretty easily searching. I typed in 2024, and then I typed in Girdwood Comprehensive Plan. And then all this stuff comes up. This is the trails plan. Here's the comprehensive plan. It's on the second page. This is it, right? So then I clicked on
It's yeah, that's the memo. It's the AO 114, I think. So that should be towards the bottom of the page. There you go. Oh, and it's it's AO 114. Yeah.
Okay. So yes, make sure you're looking for the AO 2024-114. Okay. And then you go to details. But so how do people comment though?
So well, the easiest way to comment is when it's actually on the agenda, and that agenda isn't going to be published until next week. So when it's
Okay.
on the agenda, that's where you can see the link for emailing to get phone testimony, and you can also make comments directly.
Okay.
There is another link which I will find and add to,
Will the
add to
agenda,
an email.
but will the agenda link show up here, or do they have to go somewhere else for that?
I think the agenda link, you have to go somewhere else. It is a horrible website.
Yeah, see, I'm mostly doing this to show how hard it is to find it,
Yes.
even for somebody who like knows.
So let's say if we go contact member, if you click on contact members, then you get at the top there. So if you click on contact members there, this gives you both the email addresses of everyone individually and the whole assembly. And the email address is assembly@anchorageak.gov.
Yeah. So I guess the point is there's a couple of ways for you to participate. You can email the members directly and submit comments. You can do that. You can comment through the portal. You can sign up. Is there a portal?
If you go to submit public testimony on that page, it's right in front of you at the top. That's the link. Right. So this is the main one. So here we just have to, it's Girdwood Comprehensive Plan or AO 2024-114. And then you'll get that form basically enables you to type in the information, although it gets formatted in a rather ugly way, but your words will be transmitted. And that becomes part of the official public record. If you email assembly members, it isn't part of the official public record, but it's still communication with members. And some, if they have time, will respond. In many cases, you'll get multiple responses from different members.
And then when it's on the agenda, then you can sign up to, but then you could also show up to the meeting and get in line and submit your public testimony orally too. You can just show up to the meeting. There's also that. Soren?
Yeah. No, that parking wasn't me. Hey, I have just a question for you, Holly and Mike. Where is Suzanne LaFrance on this, and does she have any influence in this whole process? Can she veto the assembly's action? And I've spoken with her or anybody on her team. And I'm just kind of wondering, if people would be also inclined to send comments to her.
Yeah, it's important.
What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll answer that. The administration's opinion on the plan is an important opinion, but ultimately they're not voting on it. So, and they're not voting on amendments. So planning is part of the administration. The mayor's office is another part of the administration. Suzanne has been very supportive of this whole project. I've spoken to her relatively recently about this, and she'd actually had read parts of the plan, and supported the general concept. I haven't had a discussion with her in detail about the specific changes that were proposed. I think I will have an opportunity to do that before the 17th. So at that point, again, I know she's supportive of the community view. She knows that the community has been very, very involved in this, and she supports community involvement. But ultimately, the mayor herself does not have a vote. It's a legislative assembly action. But the mayor's opinion, the opinion of the administration in general, other departments as well, are also influential. So there's nothing wrong with contacting the mayor's office directly. I think the focus should be on the assembly, though, the people who are actually going to make the decision.
And do you expect the assembly will try to offer some amendments?
Possibly.
To the and what's your plan there?
Yeah. So as I said, our plan is to provide an update on the document, which incorporates all the changes that are uncontroversial and which are everyone agrees are improvements, and then have an S version which is based on that updated version of the document. So that S version will include most of the things that planning and zoning have requested, but not all the things planning and zoning have requested. And then there will probably, if that's the one where which gets moved and the discussion is focused on, then there will almost certainly be members who will move amendments to make it closer to to follow planning and zoning recommendations where they differ from the community. And there will be, at the end of the day, if 7 people agree, then that amendment gets included. We've done, I think the counter message here is, as we heard from an assembly member, 10 out of the 12 don't represent Girdwood, don't really know much about Girdwood. One can argue probably shouldn't impose their prejudices and opinion and lack of opinions on what the community itself wants when it's been a very, very very engaged process, and I think an educated process. We really have done a lot of work here. This is not being imposed from outside the community. This is actually, unlike a lot of the plans that have been adopted, this is a plan that really is organically arranged. It organically came from the community and has been, nurtured by the community the whole way through. So this really does represent very closely, I think, what the community wants. Obviously, not every single person agrees in the community, but this does represent the sort of mass of community opinion. So it's, it wouldn't be unusual if assembly members have a different opinion. But I think we have a very, very strong case that this really does represent what comprehensive plan is meant to represent, which is the community's vision and how that, how that affects land use and policies and for the future.
Is the S version coming from Imagine Girdwood, or is that going to be through GBOS? Or
if there's an S version, it'll be sponsored by assembly members.
No,
probably 2 or 3 assembly members. There will be, if we do get to, we think we'll have an S version. That will be something which will be available before it should be available a couple of days before the meeting.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Hey, Mike, it's Mike Davidson. Do you mind me just asking a quick question?
Yeah, of course. Please go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm not as familiar as probably most people on the call, but I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. I think I'm looking at the July 31st summary of the meeting, but I get the impression that the key point of the contention is this planning department reference 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D, the ones that are listed as not consistent with the GCP. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, there were 4 of the areas in the land use map, though there was disagreement. But I think since then we've realized that the 2C thing, which is about South Town site, is not really disagreement at all. It's just a slightly different nuance on exactly the same opinion. We just have to make sure the map aligns. So I don't think 2C is really under question anymore. It's really 2A, or really the other way they've referenced it is Area 1, Area 2, Area 4.
And then
there is one additional thing, which the planning department recommended, which planning and zoning did not agree with, which was a change in zoning or a change in land use designation for the areas, basically the areas that are in the grid in Alyeska Basin. So it's between it's basically the areas to the north of Alyeska Highway and from Alpine Meadows to the resort.
Right.
And they're arguing that there should be a different it should be mixed density rather than low density. But again, part of the problem there is the way we use the word density. That isn't actually what we meant. So I think by cleaning that up and by having a clearer argument about what we actually mean when we use those terms, what planning was asking for, we achieve anyway within our proposed plan.
And then just to make sure for testimony, I heard you accurately describe it. I think you described that there's 2,000 residents and that approximately 900 of them have participated at some point in this process.
Yes.
So I'm not as good at math as you all do the math, but call that 45%, give or take.
It's almost half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think what I hear you say when you talk to Soren there is that there could be a substitute version coming out that might come out a few days before the meeting so perhaps it's better to reserve submitting written testimony until that few days before, so that perhaps one would support the S version if one is produced.
I think you can make comments now for written testimony. You can make comments now on what's there on the first version, which is basically the planning and zoning opinions, recommendations. You can make comments now. If an S version comes out, you can also make written comments on that. So there's nothing to stop you from making, multiple comments.
Okay, so you
can only do one. You can submit it in writing. You can only do one spoken testimony, and that will be at the meeting on the 17th, either by phone or in person.
Okay, that helps me out. I appreciate it.
Hey, Mike Bernsky here.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah, I think, as far as the testimony we make, while we might be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time in front of the assembly, our written comments can be as prolific as we want them to be. And I think that we should all feel comfortable basically taking our written comments and summarizing them to fit into a 3-minute time frame.
Yes, I think if they reinforce each other, that's helpful. Any other comments anybody would like to make? Crystal, go ahead.
So, can I get an update about the vegetative buffer and kind of what we're expecting? That I know in the work session, hold on. The planning department was pushing back on the vegetative buffers, and in the plan, I believe we submitted, it said 100-foot vegetative buffer between existing developments and new developments. And in the planning department person there at the work session was suggesting 30 feet. And so I'm interested to hear, has there been additional dialogue? What is the plan there? Thanks.
I'm going to hand this to Holly to describe how we got to that language that we thought both planning and we were in agreement with.
Well, Bree and I mean, our thinking on this, and our backgrounds are landscape architecture, right? So we had feel like we're pretty good at thinking about trees. And so we were thinking that, okay, I'm imagining myself in a house. I know what those huge trees in Girdwoods are like. I mean, you want at least 2, right? And I was thinking, based on how big your trees are, that they're like 40 feet, 50 feet maybe. So that's what we were thinking, just like 2 big trees. Like that was the intent. So I think we're gonna push back on that. Like, I think we'll say, I think it's gonna be anywhere from 80 to 100 feet for two large trees. And I think we're gonna push back on that. I don't think 30 feet is enough. But I don't know. Go ahead, Daniel.
I think they got the 30 feet from the other standards in code. I'm trying to look up the reference, but
Yeah, and there's
I feel like it
no-
came from like a standard buffer is 30 feet. And
Yeah,
so
and
that's
like,
where the number came from.
But isn't a standard buffer is also can be newly planted vegetation, can't it? In many cases. And we're saying absolutely not that. The whole point is to maintain existing vegetation.
Yeah, I think in most cases, but it's just talking about,
Yeah. So again, this is applying, what works in Anchorage Bowl to the situation here, and we're basically pointing out that's not the function. The function of vegetative buffers is a different thing. It's to provide a set of, wildlife corridor and a bunch of other things as well as visual screening, and it's at the track level as well. I think there's, I definitely heard a comment. I think was a misunderstanding of we're asking for 100 feet between each lot, which we are not. It's 100 feet between a completely new development area and existing development, and it's really only around a couple of areas. A lot of that is visual buffering from elevation around by the resort.
I mean,
Can
the
I
other
do a
argument.
follow-up?
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if, so Holly, did your and Bree's comments then about that kind of the justification for why we asked for that amount as far as like each tree is 40, possibly 40 feet by itself? Did you, I don't recall that being discussed really in the work session. So has that been relayed to them in an email or, any kind of communication beyond the work session?
I think my plan right now is when we update the document for the S version, we'll include more reasoning in the narrative for where that came from. And then what's gonna have to happen. And then, so I'm intending for the S version to, what is it? What would happen in the S version, Mike? Because I'm intending for it to stay 100 feet.
Yeah, but as long as we have a justification for it, then one could argue that functionally we have a functional definition and we've estimated what that means in terms of feet. But the functional definition has to be adequate for basically 2 layers of trees. That's how we describe it. And if the argument is, can it be 85 feet? Probably. I mean, if it meets the functional definition, that's fine. We were recommended that we should have a number in there. So we have a number. We're not going to back off we don't want to back off from the functional description, but maybe the number isn't perfect. It's just a guess.
Right.
But it's not 30 feet or 15. It's, 80-ish.
I can't remember what the original AO said. What does the original AO say though about it? Just that we're going to work together to agree on language.
Yeah. That was the recommendation that came out of planning and zoning. Because there was clearly a miscommunication. You worked together. We came up with that language. That's the language we proposed, and we thought planning had agreed to.
And so now they're proposing something different.
Yeah.
So we are going to move forward, and I'm assuming that the S version should include the language that we agree.
Yeah, it includes the agreement. Yeah, what we agreed to.
Kirk?
Yeah, on that subject, I think you mentioned that there really is only a couple specific areas where this applies. And if that's the case, maybe just make sure everybody understands where those areas are so that we don't get bogged down in this particular topic. If people can agree, 100 feet in these 3 areas or whatever makes sense. And then you make your case, and it's not about everything. It's about these areas that are important.
Do you have the map available, Holly?
It'll take me a minute, but I do.
Okay.
Am I still sharing?
No.
You don't need to see me navigate my filing system. So what's gonna happen with these maps, I'll share now. Okay, so what'll happen is it's this green line here and this green line here. It'll end up being a dashed line, more like the transportation system.
I couldn't see your mouse pointer very clearly there, but it's basically the green line through the mine roads and up by the other side of Crow Creek. So it's basically between Crow Creek, Alyeska Highway, just to the west of that. So the idea is that would provide screening from development which could basically have more vegetation removal. And part of the reason it's in that location is one of the common view sheds you see from Girdwood is what it looks like up on the mountain. And by having them in those locations, if you end up with sort of buildings using more of the lot coverage and fewer existing trees in those darker areas, then it provides visual screening between from elevation to those areas of higher development. So ultimately, you still see a mostly wooded valley. And then it provides other things like wildlife corridors, etc. I just have to step away for about 1 minute, but I will be back.
I think the other, and now keep in mind, anyway, I think the other thing was that the planning department thought it took away too much land that was potentially developable. But I don't know, Bree and I also did a lot of thinking about that. And I mean, if you look at this parcel here, I don't know, it still feels like it keeps a lot of land available to subdivide for housing as needed. So while providing a buffer between developments for all the purposes Mike just said.
That does remind me of one question. One number we didn't have is how much basically undeveloped land are we allocating towards residential in any sort? So residential or mixed use or mixed density, because our analysis of needs is somewhere around at most 100 acres, and I think we're allocating closer to 500.
Yeah, we need to add these parcels for sure.
Yeah, so I mean that's the other message. If there was this push, but there was this kind of argument at the planning and zoning that if we should just maximize the amount of land we allocate towards housing, but we're already allocating far more than we anticipate we will need. In fact, this I think expands a bit from what was there 30 years ago, and obviously most of it wasn't developed in the last 30 years. It's unlikely it's going to be in the next 10 or 20. So we've already effectively over allocated, and the argument of you have to just keep going. Again, at some point it becomes not a valuable exercise. So we're allocating 500. We need about 100 for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, Kirk, that's an important point.
Yep.
And that's really the counter to the Mitten and Virgin Creek. It's not necessary. All this other areas that are new to development are going to provide what's needed and then some. Therefore, these other areas can be continually used as they have been to add value to the community's natural areas.
Right. I think the other argument about Virgin Creek is, I think the argument that planning have put forward to is there's water and sewer there. True, there is water and sewer near there, but there isn't road. The road is already beyond capacity. Some of the other areas we're talking about, not South Townsite, but the the areas along, for example, the mine roads now by Crow Creek, there's sewer there, there's electricity there, there's road access there. There isn't water at the moment, but of all the different utilities, water is the one where it's easiest to It's easy to put wells in. It's much harder to put a septic in. So the fact they already have sewer means that, you know, the majority of sewer and water, sewer and road means the two most expensive utilities are already available. And water currently isn't, or at least mains water isn't. It would have to be wells. But we're also going through a process of trying to get water extended across the valley. But that's a future activity. Barbara.
I was just trying to go through and find, I knew that I had written up something about the math of this, of course. So just to give you some numbers when we were talking about how much land is developable, etc. I was taking on the thing where planning was saying only 1 out of 11. That area 1 was one of only 11 developable parcels. So if you look, I came up with these 11 parcels. Even though there's only 11 of them, they represent 33% of HLB's acreage. And that came out to 2,150 acres. So I think again, this was a long time ago, but I think what I came up with was I looked at what parcels they said were developable, and then I looked up what the total number of acres was supposed to be in each of those parcels and added it all together. So I would have to double check that, but it appears, you know, if you're going to say 100 acres and actually there are 2,150 acres available, we're way over what we need. We don't need to be in places like the Mitten.
I think part of the thing with that is that I'm not sure that the land use designations always follow the parcel lines. So, and it has to do with what is developable, and because that's what the land use designations are based upon. So like, do you see this triangle here?
Yeah.
That's an HLB parcel there, and some of it is open space, some of it is because it has to do with what's developable.
Got it.
So it's not like a one-to-one thing based on the actual HLB parcels.
We should be able to get numbers from the GIS system.
Yeah, we do.
From the maps here. So, I mean, that's, again, if you can provide that, then that's really helpful. And, you know, this 500 acres compares to I think it's under 300 acres is currently developed, excluding the resort. So we have under 300 now. We're talking about maybe adding a third, and we're allocating 500 roughly. It may be 400 and something, or it may be over 500, but it's that sort of order.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, can you guys help us come up with some more detail on this? So the needs analysis, I think is in the Girdwood Comprehensive Plan. I don't recall what page it's on right now, but it would be great to have some detail and a few bullet points on this that we could use in our comments to the assembly and our written comments and things like this that help us really hammer a message home that we are taking into account development, so you know, so that we can not impact other areas that have other values in our community. It would be great if we would be able to use something you guys could put together for us in some of our responses.
I take your point, Brian. I was hoping I would actually have that summary available for this meeting, and I do not. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean that's a big. There's a couple. Yeah, there's a couple of key points like that. You know, the concept that the solution to more housing is having occupied housing. The emphasis on better use of current housing. These are these are points that when we all can bring the same message forward, that's what gets heard by the assembly.
Yeah, it's actually at the very end, the last 2 pages of section 2, at page 254 and 255 are the tables we're referring to for the 100 acres. It basically projects about 25 acres of commercial land and about 60 acres of residential, assuming the same density, the same kind of housing as we have now. Obviously, you need less land if we have a different mix of housing.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
So if there's any more questions or suggestions or recommendations or comments or anything else, we can take them now. Otherwise, let's move on to I think we can just wrap this up by basically
Mike,
saying
one more.
Yeah, sure. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, what sort of, who's going to be posting in Girdwood or Girdwood Uncensored as far as encouraging people to attend the meeting?
Probably not me. I know one person, Amanda, has been very good at posting
Yeah.
things in the past on the Facebook side. So is that something you'd like to do?
Yeah, I was planning on sending out an email and posting it to the Facebook page once the comment period or the agenda link is available. Because then we have something to point to.
Yep.
So I'm guessing next week.
Should be next
Go for
Wednesday
it.
when that becomes available.
Great.
Fantastic. Awesome.
Okay. If there are no more points on this, then, I mean, again, you know us, contact us directly, contact us via the email if you wish. We're going to be, doing lots of work on this and hopefully getting some more messaging out in the next week or so. If there are no more comments in this, we'll just go to the fundraising needs. So we originally thought this was going to take about $3,000 beyond what we had available. And we've raised nearly 1,300 of that without an aggressive outreach. My sense is we probably have to be a little bit more forceful in the outreach rather than just letting people stumble across it. We should actually, broadcast it more. And we probably may need to up that a little bit as well. I think 3,000 didn't account for a lot of the work that's been added to this in the last few weeks. So I don't know. Do you have a better estimate, Holly, of where we should be aiming for?
What I don't know right now is how much time Shanna's going to invest. Like right now, I would
Yeah,
say
okay.
I looked at. I've spent 1,600 of the 3,000, so I'm
okay.
not as far through it as you thought I was. But that doesn't
Okay.
account for any of Shanna's time.
Right. Now, Shanna was at the work session,
She was.
but I don't think she'll need to be involved in any revision.
No.
But it would be helpful having her at the be very helpful having her at the assembly if she is available.
Right. I mean, I honestly, these changes have to happen pretty quickly because I don't have a lot of time to make them.
Yeah.
I bet that I can have my staff make the changes with the funds remaining.
Okay. That's excellent news.
So let's just see how far this goes, and I'll just add Shanna's time. It might be fine just with the 3,000.
Okay. So in that case, so what we'll do then is we'll proceed assuming that's our goal, and if it turns out it slightly exceeds it, we can also, as long as you don't, refuse to release the document or something until you get paid.
It's absolutely yours.
We'll pay you.
Does
will do,
that
absolutely will.
3,000 include the
Oh.
1,800?
No, it doesn't. So that's,
So are we there?
we're probably fine. That's what I'm thinking.
Well,
I think
then
we're-
how about we,
Oh,
yeah,
I see. I thought you'd included the
just-
1,800 from the ARPA. Okay.
we'll be able to make up the difference, I bet you. Unless you figure it's gonna be a couple of $1,000s. So let's see how it rides.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, that's better news than I thought. Thank you. Thank you, Ollie. And Amanda for clarifying that. Crystal.
I was just gonna say, I'm about to put out a Girdwood Inc. newsletter, and that goes out to 1,200 addresses. So if we
Right.
want to submit a little paragraph, like if the Imagine Girdwood Executive Committee could draft up a paragraph, that would be great. And then I'm definitely calling attention to the public hearing. And then,
Thanks.
and so that's, and then I was just gonna say, and then we could also ask for additional funding. So if you want to do that in your paragraph, please include that, and then we could do like a little
Okay.
QR code that goes to the thing.
Okay, thank you so much. When do you need that by?
I was kind of waiting for assembly meeting yesterday to gather my thoughts on things I wanted to include about it, because I'll be putting stuff about Project Anchorage in there as well, and then Little Bears updates for installing the utilities. So I'm ready to, I'm ready for it to go to print in a few days, so the sooner the better.
Okay, right. So we'll try and get something to you tomorrow. Okay, so fundraising healthier than I thought. Any other comments or input or suggestions or tasteful jokes?
I'll speak up one more time. I ran into an assembly member at the Girdwood Brewery, and he made it very clear that he intends to make amendments. So
Right, I can guess who that was.
yeah, so, got to be prepared.
Yeah, we just won't know what they are until they probably won't be. We won't know necessarily what they are until the meeting itself, which is one of the frustrations if they're floor amendments. Sometimes they're published beforehand and you can't get hold of them, but often you don't know about them until the meeting itself. Again, it's unfortunate when there's, effectively 5-6 months of public comment process within the community, and then, we get half an hour's notice there's some major change, and it's not even available sometimes during the public testimony part. It only appears afterwards. Okay. On that note, if there are no other public comments, normally we could have a meeting in late December. I think we should just play it by ear. We'll focus on getting communications out. I think the sort of one-pager major points to hit that Bernsky suggested is a good thing. And then we'll focus on the public hearing. And if there's a need to come back and have a discussion later on in this month, we will do so. I was thinking we may need to sort of continue fundraising for a while, but if it looks like we don't even need to do that, then we'll probably just have we may end up with just one more wrap-up meeting.
A celebration.
The end of an era, a celebration, absolutely a
champagne, I hope.
celebration.
Yeah, maybe we do it in person.
Depends
the
what's left
last
in the
one.
budget, doesn't it?
I don't think I normally have parties with clients, but in this scenario, I will absolutely do that.
We will have in Girdwood though,
We'll see if we can get the community center.
or the brewery.
The brewery is probably more
Thank you,
appropriate.
everybody, for all your work.
Yeah, thanks. What has it been? I don't know. Let me tell you what I've enjoyed. Like sometimes I wouldn't say it's good for projects to take this long all the time. But when you do take this amount of time and do it the right way, you really get to I really feel like I know you all and I know the community. I see funny things on the internet and I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. Funny things about Girdwood, I mean. I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that means. So anyway,
I think it was actually late 2018 where we had where the RFP went out.
Mhm.
So we probably had the interview near the end of 2018
Mhm.
with the kickoff in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so literally 6 years. It's definitely been a journey. Okay, I think I'm going to call this meeting. If somebody wants to officially call it adjourned, we will do
Motion
that.
to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
So adjourned at 7:40. Thanks, everyone.